Okay, let me...
I'm going to do some pauses just to fill it.
We are all a group of first-generation students whose parents immigrated to this country to give us a better life. As first-generation kids, we feel that our parents sacrificed so much for us to work hard and be a part of society here in the U.S. Not just as students who are reaching for our goals, but also as adult Americans who have successful careers, who can help other children like us who face similar situations. It always helps make you feel better when someone who faced the same situation that you have but has succeeded and made their life's dream come true. There are many people in this country who can relate to not only struggles that comes with being a first-generation kid, but also being the kid of parents who want to become legal in this country. The story of Miriam Aguayo is the story of many people here in the U.S. She came to America when she was just a little girl with her family. She remembers it like it was just yesterday. And I mean, who wouldn't remember the day when your life changed forever? Coming from a country where everyone is getting robbed, raped, or kept for ransom, it's always worth facing the discrimination and hidden life that comes when coming to the United States. Our parents believe that's the same thing about coming to the U.S., and just like Miriam, we continue to push through every day to work hard to make our lives a living testimony to our parents' sacrifice. Considering our parents gave up so much, like my mother, who went to school in Mexico and had a really good job as an accountant, you can ask yourself, why did she come to the U.S. in the first place? Well, even though she was successful in Mexico, it just made her a bigger target there for people who wanted her money and her status. So she came to the U.S. with the impression that she could do the same thing, but with a better outcome. No human is illegal, so we need to start opening doors for the children who have no say and for people who know that they are coming to a new country for a better life, so they can start being a part of the American dream. Our speech will clarify how long the naturalization process is, more specifically focusing on the children who are brought here without a say by Jasmine, people who are here as refugees by Fariel, and finally how we can help make that process easier for them by Christian. Even though we believe otherwise, some people believe that immigrants are just a big waste of space. You will always hear people say that immigrants take our jobs, they don't contribute to society, or all they do is bring their problems and violence. It's pretty fair that Americans would want their country to be full of people that are good, or at least want to help their country be a better place. I find that people need to accept the ability that everyone has, including American citizens, to do both good and bad. However, it is difficult to accept this in everyone, especially from people in other countries that you don't know or don't understand. And everyone fears what they don't understand. This is why the process to becoming a legal citizen is long and well thought out so that we can filter out all the bad immigrants and only accept the immigrants deemed good enough.
There are about 4 million immigrant children from kindergarten through 12th grade. A lot of these children, well, all of these children were brought here without, their willing. They didn't want to come here. A lot of them didn't want to come. They wanted to stay back. A lot of these children were brought when they were really, really young. Probably some newborns. It just depends. A lot of these children were brought since a really young age, and they didn't have a choice. They didn't have the choice if they wanted to stay home or have to come. If they stayed, they could have got killed. They could have got raped. Anything could have happened to them if they stayed back home. So that's why these parents brought their children to the United States so they could have a better life, so they could live a better life than what they were living back at home, so they wouldn't have to work as hard, so they could go to school and have a better living for themselves. So why do we blame these children? Some of them now are adults. Why do we blame them? Why do we make them face consequences? Why do we judge them when it's not their fault that they were brought here for a better life? It's cruel, it's unfair that we blame these people for wanting to be better, for wanting more, for wanting to be educated, and for wanting to just have a better living for themselves and even for their future children. People grow up having to live here without a status, without having a social security, without anything. That doesn't mean that they don't pay for taxes. They pay for taxes, they do exactly what we do, but they just don't have a status. That means they don't have insurance, health insurance, eye insurance, dental insurance. They don't have no type of insurance, so they don't have the same benefits as us. They don't even get to go to college sometimes. A lot of these immigrant children grow up and work the cheap, dirty horrible jobs that we don't want to work. I at least don't want to work in a field, break my back for 10 cents. And those people work here for those really shitty jobs that they get. You'll never see any of these people in the corner, outside, anywhere on the street begging for money with a little petty sign. You'll see them working their asses off, having fruit stands, having flowers, anything that you could think of, they'll be selling it outside. They won't be petting you for money or begging you for money like a lot of Americans do. A lot of people think that these immigrant people don't pay taxes, don't help the government out, but they're wrong. Every single person that lives in the United States has to pay for taxes, so that means they pay for taxes as well. Then again, it comes back to, why are we blaming these children for them coming here without them wanting to? It's cruel and it's dumb. A lot of these children that are wanting to be sent back have never lived in their home country. They don't know anything about their home country. They don't know any family. They don't know anything outside other than the United States. There's people that have lived here their entire life since they were little kids, and they apply for residency. They apply to become a U.S. citizen, and it takes them 10, 15, 20, even 30 years just to get their residency, which is ridiculous. They should not have to wait that long to become a U.S. citizen. What if they want to travel outside of the country, visit their family members that they left behind? They can never see them, their grandparents, which is completely unfair. It's not their fault. They should be, this process for them to become legal, if they don't have any criminal records, any type of felony, should be fast. My mom was actually an immigrant child. She came here when she was about 7 years old. She lived in one bedroom apartment with my grandparents, with my grandma and her 2 other siblings. My grandma worked a really shitty job, barely made money. My mom didn't try a cheeseburger from Wendy's till she was about 15 years old because they couldn't afford it. They ate beans, rice, whatever they could afford, and my grandma worked a really shitty job. My mom actually went to elementary here, middle school, and didn't finish high school because she wanted to help out her mom, and support her other siblings, which is ridiculous. My mom worked a really shitty job when she was younger. My mom, got pushed down, throw dirt at her, anything you could think of just so she could get to where she's at. Now she has her own business. Even though she has her own business and she picked up herself from the way bottom, she's been here for over almost 35 years, and she still doesn't have residency. She still doesn't have a visa. She's still not a citizen, and she's applied, and it's been a 30-year process. She goes to immigration court, at least once every 3 months, just to check in to see if she's doing good, if she doesn't have criminal records. And once that's done, she'll be able to get a visa. And then after she gets the visa, she'll be able to get residency. And then after 10 years, she'll be able to become a U.S. citizen, which is ridiculous. I just think this process is ridiculous and should be speeded up a lot more than it should. It shouldn't take 15, 20, 30 years for someone that's been here their whole life to become a citizen.
So the vast majority of immigrants who come into the United States do so in their search for asylum. Asylum is protection granted by a nation to someone who has left their native country as a political refugee. The definition of refugee is very important throughout the asylum process because it's a very long process, and if you don't meet the requirements of a refugee, you're not going to be able to qualify for asylum. And the asylum process is 7 steps long, so you have to be physically present in the United States and apply for an I-589 application for asylum and for withholding of removal with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And this has to be done within your first year of being in the United States. After that, you're going to receive 2 notices. One is the acknowledgement that they've received your application, and the next is when you can visit your nearest application center to get fingerprinted and background checked, and that is the 3rd step. After that, you will get a notice for your interview, and the interview process goes through a priority ranking. So those who receive first priority for interviews, or anybody who was scheduled to have interviews, but rescheduled. And either the applicant or the USCIS could reschedule this interview. The second priority list are applicants who are pending for 21 days or less since the time that they filed. And the last is anybody else who's left in the ranking. So they start off with the newest applicants and they make their way back to the older applications. In the interview process, you can have your lawyer present, and if you're unable to speak English, then you must have an interpreter with you. One will not be provided for you. You can have your spouse or kids or anybody who wants to also reap your asylum benefits. And you can also bring a witness to testify on your behalf to testify that you are a law-abiding citizen and you will do good for the country that you're about to enter. So when it comes to determining your eligibility, you have to, the first most important thing is that you have to pass your background check. If you not pass your background check, then you're automatically disqualified and you will be sent back to the country that you are fleeing from. The second is that you must meet the the government's definition of a refugee, which is basically stating that a refugee is a person who leaves their place of nationality, who is unable or unwilling to return based off of fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. And this is tricky for people who come to seek asylum for things like gang violence within their country, or if they're fleeing on out of fear of domestic violence. They do not qualify for asylum because they do not meet the government mandated definition of a refugee. So then they get taken out of the application process as well. So once you receive your decision, then you can apply for your green card. But the decision process can take longer than the amount of time originally stated. The entire asylum filing process is said to be about 180 days from the time that you do apply for asylum. You generally get an interview about 45 days after you send in your application, and then 180 days from the application date, you will receive your decision. But if you are lower in the priority ranking, or if you have certain circumstances, it can take several years for you to even get to the point of the interview in your asylum seeking process. You're also ineligible to apply for asylum if you do not meet the 1-year filing deadline, if you had a previous asylum application denied by immigration, or if you qualify to be sent to a second or third country based off of a relationship that the U.S. government has with a third party that says that you could go to that country instead of the United States in your seek of asylum. Most people cannot afford to wait this amount of time because while you are waiting your asylum process, you do not have any benefits. You have no right to work. You don't have any health care. You're basically living a life with no rights to live, which is absolutely absurd. Most flee from social wars in their country or circumstances that put their life in danger. And to have to come and be denied that process is completely unfair. My mother's family fled from Afghanistan in about 1985. They stayed in Pakistan for a year in a refugee camp. They fled from Afghanistan because during that time, Russia had invaded for natural resources, and at that time they were very heavily pushing the influence of communism in the country. So being a predominantly Islamic country, anybody who practiced Islam openly was persecuted. They were jailed. They were beaten. Any type of human rights violation you could think of was pushed down upon any Muslims. So out of fear of losing their life for their religious beliefs, my family fled. And at that time, my grandpa was already in the United States on an education visa, getting his master's degree in Missouri. And even though they already had ties to the United States through my grandfather, their application process still took several years because of how unorganized and how diligent the refugee process is. And they almost weren't able to get their citizenship for about 6 or 7 years after they first came. So this goes right back into Miriam's story and how she's now part of the solution. As of November 2017, she was sworn in as an attorney for undocumented and unaccompanied immigrant children. She worked with 20 shelters in southern Texas in order to help them through this asylum process and get through the process of and make it easier for them to battle through a process they had no say in and flee from circumstances that no person should ever have to endure.
With every issue, there's always a solution. We've talked about the application process for asylum for refugees. We've talked about it for immigrants that came here at a young age. We try to figure out what can we do to be able to provide a better life for these immigrants that come here both legally and illegally. Now, personally, I'm a first-generation Filipino American. My mom came here in 1980. Now, the application process for her to be naturalized as a U.S. citizen has taken a long time. In 1985, she received her green card, where she was able to be petitioned for a U.S. citizenship through my grandmother. What a lot of people don't know is that if you are petitioned by your parents, you will be qualified to be able to apply for a U.S. citizenship. However, for myself, if I was not that of living here in America and I was, let's say, living in the Philippines, I could not be petitioned by my grandparent. But relating back to my mom, 1985, green card. However, it took her until probably 1995 to actually become a U.S. citizen. 15 years. That's a long time. You think about Jasmine, who gave her input about her mom, who came here at a very early age. She's been in the States for pretty much all her life. It's almost 35 years, and she's still struggling to receive any type of immigration or citizenship within the United States. Now, you also want to consider the struggles that other immigrants have. Jose Antonio Vargas, who is a journalist for The New Yorker, who is famous for two things. Number one, interviewing Mark Zuckerberg, as well as number two, publicly coming out as an illegal immigrant. The story that he shares is very personal and very interesting, and brings up questions to us as first-generation Americans and children of immigrants. In 1993, Jose came here as an immigrant from the Philippines through the petition of his parents. However, he was provided a green card as well as a document and passports from his grandparents. However, when he was 16 years old in 1997, he tried applying for a driver's license, which he was denied. The reason being is because the green card that his grandfather provided to him was fake. Now you're looking 22 years later. Jose has proved to be a very successful journalist, has done TED Talks, has showed up at Republican and Democratic parties and elections and everything like that. But he has still struggled to become a citizen after those 22 years. The reason being is the programs. Now you think about the time-consuming programs that we have on the application process for all these things we've talked about. However, you ask yourself, what could we do? What could we do that's going to be beneficial for those who are facing the same issue in the future? Well, it starts with us. You think about contacting local government figures, calling them up, letting them know about these issues, contacting Congress to be able to bring up solutions for these issues, to implement programs that we can go ahead and provide a better and smooth, affordable, as well as concise application process to become citizens in this great country of the United States. You think about this. As Jasmine mentioned before, there are 4 million children from grade school to high level of high school that come here illegally or undocumented. Now you think about this. Growing up, I grew up a lot around immigrants, children of immigrants. You think about my friends that took Chinese or Vietnamese school on the weekends on Sundays, spending that time to learn their native language. Well, think about this. Why can't the government provide programs for kids that may not know their legal status, but come to find out later, just like Jose, they're not legal at all? Provide those programs for these kids to be education early, to take those steps so they don't struggle for years to come fighting to become legal. You think about the naturalization process requires you to be at least 18 years old to apply for naturalization. But also at the same time, let me ask you this. How fair is it for somebody to be born here that is a child of an immigrant? However, you have someone who comes here early and it takes them 18 years, maybe even more, for them to become a citizen, which I think is ridiculous and unfair. Jose Vargas said, actions are illegal, never people.
So with all that being said, since the establishment of the U.S.'s first colony in 1607, the United States has always stood for being a safe haven for those who are immigrants to come seek safety and asylum. While it heralds this message to bring in immigrants, it still nevertheless denies those same people on the base of their status in the society. The basic concept, as Christian just mentioned, of being able to live free of turmoil and fear for one's own life should be a right. Seeking asylum, or the basis for a better life, should never be considered illegal. Each of my colleagues has mentioned something for each and every immigrant to be given a reason as to why they should enter or attempt to enter the U.S. to escape murder, rape, kidnapping, or any sort of persecution or prosecution from their own society is something that leads them from their own homeland to here. Time and time again, these people who escape persecution ultimately are met with it once again on that of U.S. soil in the form of prejudice, racism, discrimination, ostracization from their own societies that they even reside within. Within this capitalist foundation of our Western society, we must come to accept and understand that all forms of struggle, whether it be small or large, must be acceptable when trying to achieve that of the American dream. Funny enough, the U.S. craves immigrant labor to build itself up and even spur the growth of its own economy. Yet, it still openly denies it. The instated system in that of the U.S. institutionally discriminates upon those who live within it. We understand that it is meant to keep out the bad hombres, seeking to set our society to ruin, but we must ask ourselves and we must question, why should the tired, poor, and huddled masses yearning to be free be persecuted as well? That's okay?
That was really good.
Very concise.
I was like, holy shit, where the fuck